Welcome to CT Politics TV. I'm Joe McGuire. It is currently 36 degrees under mostly cloudy skies at the Capitol. Representative Bobby Gibson is the Chief Majority Whip in the Connecticut House. He serves as the Vice Chairman of the General Law Committee and is on the Education Committee and Conservation Development Subcommittee co-chair for the Appropriations Committee. Gibson is also the Vice Chairman of the Connecticut General Assembly's Black and Puerto Rican Caucus. Bobby Gibson, much appreciated your time here today, sir.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So you actually took office in a special election in 2018. The following year, Representative Quentin Williams was elected. Q tragically passed away January 3rd. And I mean, it's been kind of heartbreaking to see just sort of the reaction from his constituents in the House. Could you just kind of talk about how important he was to the caucus and his presence at the Capitol?
Well, Joe, it's really tough. And although the majority of his services are over, the grieving is going to take place for a while. And I suspect when we are actually back together in session, some of the same emotions are going to come up because he was a rising star. He really was. He made it his intent to get to know or try to touch as many people as he can. I mean, you'll be sitting in your office and all of a sudden he'll just show up and strike up a conversation. He had an infectious smile, a laugh that came out of Hollywood. He was just a really good guy. He took a lot of things. He took everything serious. He was one of those guys that lived for today. Let's get things done. Let's not put things off until tomorrow. So he's going to be missed. Big shoes to fill, and my heart goes out to his mother and to his wife and to the city of Middletown, which he represented.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus is actually going to be doing a nationwide study looking at wrong way driving, which was, what tragically took Representative Williams's life. That's kind of become a bigger issue in the state. I think this incident really highlighted it. What are you guys hoping you'll be able to achieve and implement better versions of the wrong way? I mean, I know some things have been introduced in the past year. What do you kind of see long term here? What's the goal?
Well, this is something I take personal. Back in 2018, I received a phone call. One of my dear friends, Melvin Wells, an outstanding man in the New Haven community, was killed in a wrong way accident. He was actually coming back from visiting his son in college, and it was tragic. I met Melvin when I was a freshman at Southern Connecticut State University. I played football, and I was a freshman. He was a big defensive tackle. He's like one of those Clark Kent Superman type guys on the on the field. He was a monster, but in real life he was just the biggest heart. I remember he walked past me and he's like, "Hey rookie, how's your fastball?" I didn't know what he was talking about. My name's Bob Gibson, the Hall of Famer pitcher Bob Gibson.
Right. Yeah.
But we became real good friends, and we pledged the same fraternity. When I was the head football coach at Bloomfield High School, he called me up because I had taken over for Jack Cochran and I had huge shoes to fill. And he said, "I want to help you out." And he became one of my assistants. So, it was a tragic loss, his death. And since then, I had actually put out two PSAs on wrong-way driving, and I've had numerous interviews. And so what we want to do is team up with the legislature. I know Senator Fonfara acquired $20 million for a pilot program for the Department of Transportation. But what we really want to do is bring awareness before another accident actually happens. It's not enough to report on it afterwards. We need to really get the word out there. I think as an educator myself, I think we need to put it into driver education courses, the dangers of it. The more we talk about it, the more we get the word out there, and maybe more lives we can save. And I just, I'm just an educator. I don't know anything, right? But with the technology that we have, it's unfathomable that we can't stop this somehow. Other states have done it. They've dropped their numbers. We can do it here in Connecticut.
Do we think the last 2 years, I know the numbers of pedestrian deaths has been exceptionally high as well. Is this all maybe tied into mental health, or is this literally just people aren't being safe on the roads?
You know, you have to think, prior to this year, those accidents were happening. Like I mentioned, my friend Melvin Wells in 2018, but the numbers aren't as high as they are right now. So coming out of this pandemic, mental health awareness is something that's huge, right? Right across the spectrum, from the Olympics to the NFL football. We've all been touched on mental health issues, or is the fact that they're just not coming out. But I have to say that I think part of that is what's going on. People maybe aren't being aware. People are getting confused. People have other things on their minds, so they're not really focusing on what they're doing. But I just know we have to get to the bottom of this.
Now, you just kind of mentioned it, but you're a big education guy. I know you understand the importance of education. The number of kids reading at grade level in Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, and Waterbury, the numbers are like tragically low. 60% of kids who are below third grade reading level end up in jail or dead. Um, what do we do to help get these kids back up to where they need to be so they get a fair shake at things? This is about 40% of the entire student population in Connecticut. And it feels like the cities are really failing our kids, and that's really unfortunate. It's something I've been trying to highlight when I talk to legislators, and I know everybody cares a lot about education. I think it's one of the best things about Connecticut. How do we fix this?
Joe, thank you for bringing that up, and you hit it nail right on the point. Prior to the pandemic, the big cities, urban areas, where our children, right, had fallen behind. Their grade levels under where they should be. The pandemic hit. We struggled to try to get our kids into virtual learning. There was a problem with the kids having access to the internet, and so that educational gap, it just broadened. It's really something that we have to attack. Now, what's the answer? Education in this state, for the longest, we've tried a lot of different things. Chef versus O'Neill, the correct schools in my area. Um, all I know is we really have to put our grievances together, whether you're a public school or you're a private school or the charter schools, and we have to come up with a solution. Last legislative session, we had two bills that were proposed that didn't go anywhere. Hopefully this year that they will. Um, the educational cost sharing formula needs to be fixed. We just had an education meeting today, and the head of the two chairs, Chair Senator Douglas McCrory and Chairman Curry, that was one of the first things they mentioned, because it is evident. I'm here in school now, and we're trying not to focus. In my school, I'm the vice principal at Carmen Aries Middle School in Bloomfield, Connecticut. We're trying not to focus on the grade levels, because we know those exist, but we're trying to get growth out of our students as we do the assessments that we create. But outside of schools really looking into where a student is and meeting where they are and trying to find growth, the state of Connecticut has to set aside monies, because I venture to say that education and the education committee is probably one of the most important committees up there. We talk about finding out technology and solving the wrong way driving epidemic. Well, we need to educate our kids, and not just educate our kids to push them into college. We want all our kids to perhaps go to college, but perhaps some of those kids need to go into some manufacturing fields and some fields in which they use technology to be able to come up with the solution to wrong way drivers. So it's the gamut, but I do know, and you hit the nail on the head. What is the answer? We got to put the monies in. We got to set aside our differences. We got to stop fighting against private and charter schools and magnet schools, and we got to do what's best for our kids.
Yeah, I agree with all that, and that's good. I wonder too. When I first brought this issue up pre-election, we'd seen some of the numbers in the weeks leading up to election day. A lot of people who I spoke to, doing a radio show, people were suggesting tutoring. and like developing a tutoring program. And there seemed to be a lot of interest from people, especially retirees, to like, yeah, I would go into the schools and, and help tutor these kids. Is that something that could be looked at, some kind of a program? Because I think one of the things about this state that I think makes it such a great state is, you know, this election, Bobby, I mean, despite whatever people thought about the economy, right? High inflation, high gas prices, and obviously, worldwide problem, not anything specific, but you generally would hold the party in power accountable. And for people to feel that level of trust that you guys are the ones doing the right thing and this state went bluer, I think that means something for the long term of Connecticut and just where people are at as far as, we're all in this together, and we're only as good as our weakest link. So let's pull everybody together. I think that's more the attitude in Connecticut these days, I think, and I'm hopeful.
Well, Joe, I'm glad you're hopeful and you're thinking the right way. I must say, up at the Capitol, I forget the total number of state reps we have, 150. I'll just say, I know that's not the exact number, but I would say my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, the Republicans, there are some good people over there. There's some really good politicians who really care about our state. The minority leader, Candelaria, he really cares, and he's leading the Republican side, and they just want what's best. But I will say, to talk about the Democratic Party, we like to say that we are the party for the people. We like to say that we are doing things and meeting people where they are. We understand because we come from majority point. We come from communities, whereas you mentioned education, where some of those problems exist. Um, and so I think we're doing a good job on the Democratic side, getting our message across, reaching out to our constituents, listening to what they have to say, and passing really good legislation that really helps people. And you mentioned tutoring. We mentioned we already established that our major cities and actually the suburbs of those major cities. I'm in Bloomfield. We're just north of Hartford, right?
Mm.
Our kids are suffering academically. In some of our more affluent communities, what do they do? Well, if a family has the means, they will hire a tutor. They will take them to one of those educational centers and get them some additional help. Unfortunately, in a lot of communities, like people like myself, who we represent, we have great families. They're working hard. They're making a good living and doing what's right for their children. But getting a tutor or having that extra money to do that type of thing for the students, it just doesn't exist. So a program, whereas we have tutors come in, that'd be great. I used to teach in the school system when I was actually teaching in Hartford, and I worked for Catholic Charities, and we had an outstanding program. Whereas after school, the kids would be fed a dinner. They would then go into an educational setting, and they would get that extra work where they can do their homework, they can get some tutoring, they do a little recreation. So I would say part of the thing we need to do is we need to open up our schools and provide funding for after school programs, for our kids who actually need that extra help. We need to look into doing things in the summer. I mean, I know when I was a kid, going to summer school was a bad thing. It wasn't that looked upon as being good. But now as an adult and as an educator, I look back, I think our kids would benefit, every kid, whether you're below grade level, on grade level, or above grade level, are getting some type of summer enrichment, some type of summer education. So I think we need to stop thinking about traditional education in those 10 months of education from say 7:30 to 3 o'clock. I know different school districts and different grade levels have different times, but we got to get out of that mindset and think a little differently.
Ginny Monk of the Connecticut Mirror did a 4-part series on the homeless children in Connecticut. Obviously, there's been a lot of evictions, since the moratorium ran out. More children than ever find themselves homeless. I think when these kids get to school, this is another kind of part of the same issue. Learning with no food in your belly is one of the most difficult things to do. I know the national program ran out. Is are we looking at the possibility of bringing back the free breakfast for these kids?
Good point, Joe. So I know a number of legislators, and I believe one of my colleagues up in the Senate had a press conference on it. Um, and myself, I actually presented the bill. I know this is something that's heavy on all of us. If we can find the money to feed our children during the pandemic, we can continue doing this. So now a lot of people would say, well, why can't they just get food at home? Well, things have changed and things are different. And you mentioned the homeless, right? So I'll start there and then I'll continue with my point. That we have a lot of children who are homeless or who are living with relatives or actually living in state shelters who don't have access to getting up and getting a breakfast. They just don't. And there's no way. I see students here all the time. Students will come to my office. Mr. Gibson, you have a snack, or they'll go to the nurse, or I'll have to walk them down to the cafeteria and see if there's something we can get them to eat. Because you cannot. You cannot go from whenever they had dinner the night before, go all through the night, and then you get your lunch in midday. And who
Right.
I can't, Joe, we can't.
I can't do it.
So so yeah, we have to do that because the housing problem. I'm sure you're going to ask me some more questions on that. The housing problems and homeless children, that is something that's real. But then you know what? Take the traditional American family who has a mom and dad at home, and there's not, every household doesn't have a mom and dad at home, who live in a house and they go to work. Well, in the morning times, things have changed since I know when I was a kid. When I was a kid, we could afford. Well, we made it so I don't know if we could afford it, but my mom stayed at home. My dad went to work, and so my mom was able to make sure that we had a breakfast and we ate and then sent us off. But nowadays, most families have both parents who are working. And so they get up in the morning, and it's chaos in the morning, right? So everyone just got to get them on the bus, got to get them to school, got to get to work, grab an apple, maybe something like that, or just find some food, right? And that's just how our reality is right now. It wasn't how it used to be. So we really need to look into continuing the lunch program that we had during the pandemic, where we provided breakfast and we provided lunch for our students. I was exposed to. I remember I used to work for the Catholic Charities. We used to give a early dinner to our students at the end of the day. So I think those things are needed. We can do it. There's monies for it, and there's the need to take care of our families, our people.
Uh, I've talked to Senator Duff about housing here in Connecticut a bunch. He's in the real estate industry. In his real day job, if you will. Everybody wants affordable housing, and obviously everybody agrees it's a great idea, especially in the cities. It really makes sense. You have this new generation; they want to live in the city. That's what they're really looking for. How do we incentivize affordable housing? And one of the curious things Senator Duff mentioned is the idea that we're not talking about. I'm from Meriden, where the Mills projects that they put up in downtown Meriden, and affordable housing isn't that anymore. That's not what we're talking about. And I think once people kind of get over the idea of what affordable housing looks like, I think that could go a long way towards all these towns that want it, but just not in my backyard.
It's funny because you drive around different areas and you'll see new developments coming up, and it's exciting. But then you hear some other areas who are hesitant, as you said. Um, I think we need to understand that if our urban centers are strong, then the rest of our communities will be strong. We need to look into programs such as, like, say, teaching. If you live in Bloomfield and you're a resident of Bloomfield, you'll get some type of uh, incentive and maybe a little stipend or a bonus in your check if you live in the town that you work in. I think we need to look at programs like that to get people to move into our centers. Because if our centers are strong, then the rest of the state will be strong. We will invite more people to our state. There was one point in time where we were having people who were leaving our state, and I think we need to build these affordable housing and these insensitized developments to bring people back, because Connecticut is really a great place to live.
Now, on November 8th, we did task you guys with the uh, responsibility to develop early voting in the state of Connecticut. And I'm sure there's been preliminary talks. I don't think things have gotten very far, but I'm curious, Bobby Gibson, your thoughts on what you'd like to see from early voting.
Our state, our great state of Connecticut, is at the point where it's getting older. Our population is aging. Your prior question talked about having incentives for housing, and I mentioned bringing families into the state and younger families into the state and into our urban areas. But until we actually do that, we have to realize that our population is getting older. And how is it that the people who have worked the hardest, who have sweat, who have labored, who have made it a priority to exercise their right to vote and pass down that passion to us, so that we know it's our right to vote, that we must cast our vote no matter what? Why can't we make it easier for them to get their vote across? We live in Connecticut, and in November, depending on how it is, you can have snow, you can have freezing temperatures, you can have rain, wind. Why is it that we can't make it with the technology that we have right now, that we can have a program, whereas we can have those who are older than us? I'm just focusing on them right now. Make it easier for them to vote. You know, and so this can also be our younger people as well, right? But as far as voting is concerned, if we have a process where we want to elect the best and the brightest to serve us, why not make it so that our seniors, or even just people like you and I who can get around, we have an opportunity to cast our vote and have more time to think and get our vote across? Because it's not just that it's just one and done, one day and we're done. This is the vote, and the issues that affect our country and affecting our state are too important for us not to be able to exercise, and everyone have a right to exercise their right to vote.
And how do you feel about ranked choice voting?
So I'm open to hear more about ranked choice voting and to get more information on other states who are thinking about doing it. Um, I think I'm just going to leave it at that. It's something new. It's a new concept. Um, any way that we can exercise our right, just like your past question, and get the best people into office, I think is worth exploring and hearing about it.
Last thing I want to ask you about, a little controversial, but right-wing media in Connecticut's kind of blowing up about this proposed bill to lower the firefighter standards for women. And obviously, where they would waive the physical test where you have to carry 50 pounds on a course there's some outrage that you're lowering safety standards, in the name of diversity. Is that something you guys are even aware of right now, that this is kind of blowing up on the right-wing media?
Well, let me just say this. No, I'm not aware of it.
Okay.
It has not come to mind. But I will say, right next door to me is my assistant. Her name is Michelle Adams, and she is a retired firefighter, and she served valiantly, historically, and in such a brave way as a firefighter. Um, I bet you if I asked her, should you lower the standards, she would say no.
Yeah. All right. I appreciate that. It's probably something you'll end up hearing about. I saw that this morning. I thought that was kind of interesting. They're always looking for something to get people all fired up about. Um, Before I let you go, I wanna, because you're the chief majority whip, right? Your job is to make sure the votes are there, to make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page. When you watched, and I'm sure you followed this at least a little bit a couple weeks ago when the Republicans took over the U.S. House, you obviously saw how important it is, the idea of making sure you have the votes before you hit the floor, right?
Right, right, right.
What were you thinking as that was unfolding? I mean, again, as somebody whose kind of job it is to make sure that that kind of thing never happens, and we don't really see much of that in the Connecticut State House. But I was just curious your thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, I can't say today, but my title is going to be changing as of next week. And I appreciate Speaker of the House, Matt Ritter, for changing my title and making me part of his leadership team. So my next title will be coming out next week. But when I was the chief majority whip, I made sure in my way any legislation that was about to come across that I touched base with people to see where they were, making sure that they were on the side of the Democrats, and even going across the aisle and talking some of the Republicans to make them help them to understand, help them to understand, communicate with them what some of their concerns are, and maybe give some answers. So when we saw what happened in our nation's capital the past couple of weeks, tell you it was total chaos. I have to be honest with you. Speaking to some of the people, my constituents, it was embarrassing to be very honest with you, sort of comical as well. We just have to wait and see the results because I'm sure promises were made and backs were patted
Yeah.
and handshakes were made with fingers crossed behind your back. So it's we have to do better nationally. They set the standards for us locally. I'm just glad here in the state of Connecticut, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, those things don't go on. We work very well together.
Well, that is excellent. Please keep up the good work. Big thank you to Representative Bobby Gibson, who uh, you'll be announcing what next week. This new title.
It'll come out on Tuesday.
All right. Well, congratulations on that. Appreciate your time, Representative Bobby Gibson. We'll have to have you again real soon. Thank you so much.
Joe, it was my pleasure. I enjoyed it. The time went by very fast. And thank you for the work that you do and letting our constituents and letting the residents of Connecticut know what's going on. The work that you do is very, very important. And I don't say that lightly. So thank you for the time that you dedicate to your job.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you again, Representative Bobby Gibson. I'm Joe McGuire. Have a great evening. Thank you so much for watching CT Politics TV. For all the latest interviews and analysis with Connecticut's leaders, visit ctpolitics.tv and follow Twitter at ctpoliticstv. Be sure and let all your colleagues and issue groups know that CT Politics TV wants to invite them on the show. We'll see you real soon.